Welcome friends to another 40k video. Today we're going to look at the Necrons and their origin as the Necrontyr, how they link up with the Satan and how they are involved with the Star Gods. All this is taken from the Necron's 3rd edition codex and will be a direct read, and then I'll give you some impressions at the end. Let's get straight into it. It is said that the birth of the Star Gods took place during the creation of the universe itself, formed of the infinite energies unleashed in that churning mass of unimaginable force. In this anarchic interweaving, the sea of stars began to swirl and eddy into existence, and for an age the universe was nothing more than hot gas and dust, ruled over by the incomprehensible forces of billions of young suns. Long before planets had formed and cooled, the first self-aware entities emerged from the seas of plasma and mountainous flares of the suns themselves. In later years, these creatures would become known as the Satan, but at this stage in their existence they bore little resemblance to the terrifying entities they would later become. They suckled as monstrous parasites upon the uncaring parents that bore them, shortening the lives of sons by uncounted millennia. In time, these star vampires learned of flying on wings of magnetic flux, leaving their birthplaces to drift to new feeding grounds and begin the cycle again. They paid no heed to the hunks of solid matter which they passed in the void, the internal fires and pulsing electromagnetism of these newborn planets, insufficient to even register on their monstrous scale of hunger. Now, just as the stars gave birth to creatures fitting to their ilk, so the planets eventually gave rise to life, which began the long climb to sentience. First across the sea of stars was a race of beings. You may have heard of them. They are dubbed the Old Ones. They possessed a slow, cold-blooded wisdom, studying the stars and raising astrology and astronomy to an arcane science. Their understanding of the slow dance of the universe allowed them to manipulate alternate dimensions, and they undertook great works of psychic engineering. Their science allowed them to cross the vast gulf of space with a step, and they spread their spawn in many places. The Old Ones understood that all life is useful, and where they passed, they kindled new species and impregnated thousands upon thousands of worlds to make them their own. As the Old Ones spread across the galaxy, young, fiercer races struggled in their wake. The Necrontyr was such a race, born under a fearsome, scourging star, which uncaringly drove their evolution forth with atomic winds and plasma storms. What little information is known tells that their lives were short and uncertain, their bodies blighted and consumed by the searing caress of their cruel star. They were a mercurial, morbid folk, their precarious lifespans riven from cradle to grave with constant loss. The Necrontyr sought control of their destiny through science, but learned that they could not conquer the curse that had been encoded into their bodies. They preserved a single idea. They persevered, yet still their accomplishments gained them naught. Their star still reigned over them as life-giver and death god combined. Their cities were built in anticipation of their demise, the living becoming temporary residents, hurrying through the sepulchres and vast tombs of their ancestors. Unable to find peace on their own world, the Necrontyr blindly groped outward to other stars, using stasis crypts and slow-burning torch ships clad in living metal to resist the age-long journey through the void. They began to colonize distant planets. Sometime into their slow expansion, the Necrontyr encountered the Old Ones. The colonization of these ultra-intelligent mystics had been immeasurably swifter than that of the Necrontyr. That and their immense longevity, nigh on immortality, kindled a burning hatred in the Necrontyr, which ate at them spiritually as much as their hideous cancers consumed them physically. Why should one race be granted such long lives, whilst their own were cut so cruelly short? Jealousy begets hatred, and the Necrontyr turned their entire civilization towards destroying the Old Ones and their spawn. The terrible wars which followed would fill a library in their own right, but the Necrontyr could never win. Their superior technology was consistently outmaneuvered by the Old Ones, thanks to their mastery of the webway portals. The Necrontyr were pushed back until they became little more than an irritation to the Old Ones, a peril clinging to the outer dark among the halo stars. Exiled and forgotten, the Necrontyr's fury was cooled by a long millennia of imprisonment, turning instead to an utter hatred of all life and an implacable determination to avenge themselves upon their invincible foes. Since the earliest times, the Necrontyr had studied the suns to try and understand their baleful energies. After long, bitter centuries of searching for some power to unleash upon the Old Ones, the Necrontyr perceived anomalies in the oldest dying stars, in the complex skeins of etheric energy. The Necrontyr found a sentience more ancient than any corporeal life form in creation. Beings of pure energy that had spawned in the birth of the stars themselves. These entities had little conception of the universe when the Necrontyr first found them, feeding upon the solar flares and magnetic storms of bloated red giants. Here was the weapon the Necrontyr had sought, the children of the stars themselves, progeny of their death god, to cast down the Old Ones. The power of these creatures was awesome. The raw energy of stars made animate, and the Necrontyr called them Satan, or star gods in their tongue. The entities were dispatched across areas larger than planets, their consciousnesses too vast to comprehend, and how the Necrontyr were able to communicate with them is a mystery. Understanding that such diffuse minds could never perceive the material world without manifesting themselves, the Necrontyr forged bodies for them to occupy, cast from the living metal of their ships. Fragmented tales tell of translucent streamers of force shifting across space as the star vampires coiled into the realm of matter across an incorporeal starlight bridge. Very interesting, knowing the eventual fate of the Necrons themselves, that they did to the Satan what was later done to them. Incomprehensible forces were compressed into the living metal of the false bodies, which the Necrontyr had forged as the full power of the Satan found form. As the Satan became even more manifest with the focusing of their consciousness, they began to appreciate the subtleties and pleasures of both matter and life. Having been blind to life before, the close weaves of dancing particles enthralled them, and the deliciously focused trickles of electromagnetism leaked by the mortal bodies of the Necrontyr about them awoke a hunger in the Satan, quite unlike the one they had sated among the raging torrents of stars. The Necrontyr fell into awe of their discovery, and the Satan quickly took control. The power of the Satan were indeed those of gods, and it was not long before the Satan became truly worshipped as such. Perhaps they were tainted by the material world they had entered, or perhaps their manifestations were true to the sunbound existence they had enjoyed before, but they were as cruel and capricious as the stars that bore them. They revelled in the adulation and delights of encountered mortal slaves. Armed with weapons of godlike power and ships that could cross the galaxy in the blink of an eye, the Necrontyr stood ready to begin their war anew. But the Satan had another boon to grant their subjects. They offered the Necrontyr a path to immortality and stability that their race had always craved. Their cursed flesh would be replaced with living metal in imitation of their gods. Their discarded husks would be consumed, and their cold metal forms would be free to pursue their vengeance against the Old Ones, and an uncaring universe freed forever of the weakness of their mortified flesh. Whether the Necrontyr truly realized the price they would pay for accepting this pact with the Satan, we will never know, but their race was utterly purged, becoming instead the Necrons and cursing themselves to eternal servitude of their star-born gods. The Satan feasted upon their entire race, leaving behind only ghostly echoes in the memories of the metal bodies they now had. Only a few of the very strongest retained their intellect, and even they were shadows of their former selves. The Necrons cared not. They would live forever as their gods had promised. Only one thing truly remained of their race, a burning hatred of the living. Legions of the undying metal warriors set forth in their tomb ships, and the galaxy burned. The Old One's mastery of the warp was now countered by the Satan's utter supremacy in the material universe, and the enemies of the Necrons suffered greatly in the slaughter which followed. The Satan now dominated the galaxy. They were in ascension. The last bastions of the Old Ones were besieged, and the races they had nurtured became cattle for the obscene hunger of the Satan. To the young races, the Necrons and their gods were cruel masters, callously harvesting their population at will, figures of terror who demanded their adoration and fear in equal magnitude. For reasons that will probably never be known, the Satan began to battle amongst themselves for sport and spite, as they unleashed destructive forces beyond comprehension. Planets were razed, suns extinguished, and whole systems devoured by black holes. New cities were built by the toil of millions and then smashed down again. As the harvests grew thin, Satan eventually devoured Satan until only a few were left, and they sported amongst themselves for an age. Eventually, even the Old Ones, legendary for their patience, became desperate. They manipulated life into new forms with an ever stronger link to the warp, desiring minions with the capability of channeling psychic power to defend themselves. They nurtured many potential warrior races, and there is speculation that these include the earliest Eldar, the Rashan, the Knib, and many others. Perhaps the Krogs, sorry if I'm wrong on that one. Millennia passed as their creations bore fruit, and the Satan extinguished yet more life from the galaxy. The hot-blooded young races spread across the galaxy, battling Necron science with warp-spawned magics. The Satan's empire of destruction was sent reeling. The forces of the Imperium were anathema to them, and for all the hellish destruction they unleashed, they could not stay the Old One's relentless advance. The Satan unified for the first time in millennia and turned to finding a way of quelling the soul-fueled energies of the young races. They instigated a great warding, a plan to forever defeat the magics of the Old Ones by sealing off the material universe from the Imperium. With their godlike power, it was only a matter of time until they succeeded, and the greatest work of the Satan was begun. But before this was complete, the seeds of destruction the Old Ones had planted millennia before brought about an unforeseen cataclysm. The growing pains of the young races threw the untapped energies of the warp into disorder. Warp pain and destruction were mirrored in the bottomless depths of the Sea of Souls. The maelstroms of spirits unleashed in the carnage coalesced into the previously formless energies of the warp. Older warp entities became terrifying predators, rending at the souls of vulnerable psychers as their environment was torn asunder, and reforged by the energies called forth for warring in the material universe. The denizens of the warp clustered voraciously at the cracks between dimensions, seeking ways into the material world. The Old Ones brought forth newer creations to defend their last strongholds, like the hardy green-skinned Krog and the technology mimicking Jokero. But it was already too late. The Old Ones' intergalactic network was breached and lost to them, their greatest works and places of power overrun by the horrors their own creations had unleashed. Most proficient of these horrors were the enslavers, beings whose ability to dominate the young races and create their own portals with transmuted psychers brought them forth in even greater numbers. For the Old Ones, this was the final disaster, as the enslavers took control of their minions. The Pandora's box unleashed by the young races finally scattered the last of the Old Ones and broke their power forever. Life had stood at the edge of the precipice during the war between the Old Ones and the Satan. Now, as the enslavers breached the Immaterium in epidemic proportions, the survivors looked doomed. The Necrons, not lost in this, had been vindicated in their pursuit of cold science, and had the undoubted pleasure of seeing the Old One's civilization collapse. Unfortunately, it appeared the last of their master's cattle would be lost with it. The Satan, however, had a solution in keeping with their measureless perception of time. They would allow the enslavers to take what was left and let the galaxy become a wasteland. The Psycho Swarm would die, and in time, the galaxy would throw up new life for the Satan to consume. It may take millions of years, but the most important thing was to ensure that they would be there to see it. The Satan chose to escape the great catastrophe that they would sense coming by descending into Necron stasis tombs, which would be sealed for millions of years. Their machine slaves and Necron warriors would guard them whilst they slept on worlds purged of all life to keep the enslavers from their door. Only when they were disturbed by a sentient race with the correct characteristics to be mastered and consumed would the star vampires emerge. Just 2 of these Satan have emerged from their tombs to plague the galaxy thus far. They have found a new and unexpected age of civilization and war. The galaxy is blossoming with life, but still overrun with latent psychers and worshippers of the infernal warp energies unleashed by the war with the Old Ones. It will take time and many great machinations for the Satan to regain their rightful place as rulers of the galaxy. The agents of chaos must be overthrown, the Eldar eliminated, the great work completed, and humanity is subjugated before the harvest can truly begin anew. But the Satan and their Necron slaves are ageless. Their science is unparalleled, and time is on their side. Now, before I end today's video, I'd just like to come back on 2 points. The first is to update a bit of this lore with some of the more recent stuff, because some of it is now out of date. The Satan, as I understand it, were defeated and enslaved by the Necrons and placed into containers, I'll call them, where they can be used to power their machines. In current lore, it's during the reign of Zarek the Silent King that the Necrontyr meet the Satan and undergo the biotransference process, as we mentioned. But because this process robs the species of its soul and a lot of its personality, Zarek realizes afterwards the horrible fate he has given his people to. So, after the Old Ones have been defeated, the Necrons betrayed their gods and shattered them into Satan shards and imprisoned them in Tesseract labyrinths. He then ordered all the Necron dynasties to go to sleep so that they might recover their terrible losses. And it's around the time of M40 that they are slowly beginning to awaken. I just want to go over 2 interesting points that I picked up as I went through the lore. The Satan instigated a great warding, a plan to forever defeat the magics of the Old Ones by sealing off the material universe from the Imperium. That's sealing off the warp from the material universe. So I think the Black Stone that the Necrons know a lot about and use in their technology, I think that is something that was created by the Satan. We know that it can both collect and disperse, absorb and fire out, if you will, warp energy, so that's just an interesting point. And the other part was the creation of the warp gods, the 4 that we know of. We know that Slaanesh came from the Eldari, and perhaps that is referenced here. I'll just quickly go over it and then I'll give you my point, and then I'll put the microphone down for the day. The growing pains of the younger races through the untapped energies of the warp into disorder. Younger races, so there's more than one, more than just the Eldari involved. War pain and destruction were mirrored in the bottomless depths of the Sea of Souls. So that is perhaps hinting that some of the other warp gods other than Slaanesh were created by these younger races when they were warring against each other back between this conflict between the Old Ones and the Satan. Just an interesting point, and on that point, after this long recording session, I'm going to end today's video. Let me know what you think. Do you enjoy this old lore? Do you think some of it still holds value? I think it does, broadly speaking, and some nice little juicy details in there.